All right, good morning, everybody. Um, so again, yesterday we translated. Is this going? All right, we translated parts that are available online. Again, I wasn't there. I didn't hear the whole thing, and I don't get any emails or anything that has the entirety of these speeches or anything. But two clips from the current Satmar Rebbe from Williamsburg, Rabbi Zalman Leib, who I know personally. I met him a few times. He knows who I am. I know his brother also knows who I am. It's been a few years since I've seen really either of them, spoken to either of them. But but they're Baruch Hashem, very nice people, very welcoming, easy to talk to. Certainly, Rabbi Zalman Leib speaks a very, very clear English. Because I remember one time I went in for Kvittel with someone in German from Muncie. Now lives in Muncie. He's from out west, but he's a Ger Tzedek, and you look at him, he looks like a Beneshek. He looks like no one would know that he was a Ger. And we went in to see the Rebbe. Rabbi, and I've been to many, many times. But Rabbi Zalman Leib, one time I went in personally, and other times I've spoken to him, at shul and things. But he, for Rabbi Zalman Leib, we were speaking in Yiddish, and he saw that the Ger, his Yiddish wasn't so good. Might have even been before his Gerus, I don't remember. But I think what it was we made one Gerus, and then someone told him we should make another Gerus, whatever it was. Doesn't matter. So, the thing is, we did it for free, and the other Bezdin charged $1,000. So, whatever. Neither here nor there. So anyway, and this was a guy, he had no money, he had nothing. So anyway, we'll move on. But the Rabbi noticed English, whatever, the Yiddish was a little bit of a struggle, really not so bad. And he spoke English, and he has no accent. I mean, everyone has an accent, but he speaks English better than most of the literature people. Very good, clear English. And it was funny because, we asked the guy that ever had English, versteht. And then he spoke this, the Gabbai, the personal assistant there, the secretary, he said, the Rebbe understands English, he doesn't speak English. He didn't say he doesn't speak English, it's just he understands English. Which would indicate that he really doesn't speak English, just he understands English. But actually, he speaks a very, very clear English, and a very clear Yiddish also. Very, very well-spoken individual. But it should go really without saying that Rabbi, the Satmar Rebbe from Kiryas Yol, where my children go to school, also strongly opposes the Neturei Karta, and we're going to explain that in this video. But again, I didn't really answer the question. I just went over a little bit of what was actually said, and also for the sake of clarity, because a lot of the social media, they grabbed onto the fact that Rebbe Zalman Leib was inside, that he was made a statement against the Neturei Karta, and again, we're going to also have to discuss what that term actually means, and did not really discuss the other things that he said, which is why I went and translated the other side. It seemed that also he had some influence in that he was opposing attendance at the rally yesterday, and I'll admit I watched some of it live on the internet, and also he's opposing the use of the internet and everything, which, if you know anything about his family, he has one son. You could send him emails, and he responds very well. I'm not going to get into it. It was a Rav of a shul, in Borough Park. Which it just shows. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I think some of these things are just more or less for show. more than anything else. I remember, and which there's a purpose in that too. When it comes to a lot of these issues, I remember I was doing translations for Rabbi Meislish, who did like the Suda Secrets books. I was the translator for some of those, or one of the translators for some of those books. And I was talking to Rabbi Meislish, so there's about these issues, and he said that the he grew up, went to yeshiva with Rabbi Satmar and Neturei, and he asked him something about writing a book in English about the Satmar Rebbe. Not that he'd write it in Yiddish or in Hebrew, and it would be translated to English. And Rabbi Satmar and Neturei said, if I give a heskama, if I give an approbation for an English book, I'll lose my job. And then he said, no, meaning his job as the Rebbe, He said, no, I'm not asking for a haskoma, I'm just asking if the Rebbe is not going to be fighting against it. He said, no, I'm not going to fight against it. That was it. But the point, which I really love about Satmar, is that it's not a cult. Certain other Hasidic groups, I'm not going to name any names, are a little bit more cultish in how they operate. But Satmar is very open. Certain other Rebbes are not afraid they're going to quote unquote lose their job. But Rabbi Satmar and Neturei understands he's working for the people. He's not the king, And Rabbi also understands that as well, although maybe just knowing him, knowing his personality. And I love both of them. I'm not criticizing either of them. I respect both of them. But he wishes that he had what maybe some of his brothers, and one brother-in-law in particular. Again, I'm not needing to name names. In as far as and to a certain extent, he does follow more of the traditional Hasidic sense as opposed to the traditional Hungarian sense, and that's really, in a sense, with the way we look at it. But nonetheless, the point that I'm bringing out is that Satmar also isn't really a Hasidic community. It's Hasidic in the sense that they daven nusach sfard, and the Rebbe makes a tish and takes kvitlach, but it's not like the main point is, which actually David is writing here, the Satmar Rav, as opposed to Satmar Rebbe, even though he's also Satmar Rebbe, but the main function is as a Rav as opposed to a Rebbe, although the term Rebbe, I guess, was used a little bit more since the previous Rebbe. Because when we say Satmar Rav, we mean Rabbeinu Yoel, who was actually the Rav in Satmar. That's kind of part of it. I don't know. I'm driving to work, and there's at the corner of the road here, there's a handwritten sign, not even in any way, very, needs snowplow and coal, so and so, and the phone number, and the handwriting is just, it's so cute. I don't know how else to describe it. Looks like he had his 7-year-old kid write this sign, and it looks like how in Family Circus when Billy writes the comic strip for his dad. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's get back to our subject matter. So discuss who the Neturei Karta are, what are their agendas, what's the major difference between them and Satmar in terms of anti-Zionism. And again, I'm not saying anything about my own views. This is more or less a scholarly approach to how we can answer these things. Satmar is a kehila. It's an actual congregation. It's actually several congregations, some of which are more loosely affiliated, some of which are more strongly affiliated. But not only is it Kehila, but then there are, or the actual Satmar Kehilos, congregations, communities. But in addition to that, then there's also what we would call Satmar Gestimmt. That there are communities that are not Satmar, that are associated with Satmar and share the views of Satmar, and also might have a certain fealty to one or the other of the two Satmar Rebbes, or be more neutral. I mean, I always say I'm neutral when it comes to two Satmar Rebbes. My Rebbe, if I have a Rebbe, is the Kal of a Rebbe, and he's a Mechuden with both Satmar Rebbes. Mechuden meaning his grandchildren are married to their grandchildren, right? It's both Satmar Rebbes. He's not taking sides, and that's, you know, a major way that I look at things. And then also I you know, ideologically, in many ways, I have a tremendous respect for Yitzchak Leibovich, who was more of an independent thinker. He was a Talmud of the old Satmar Rav, but he doesn't identify with the Satmar today the way Rabbi Yitzchak Leibovich speaks. He says Satmar, that shouldn't be like even the name of a community at all, but rather that's just the name of the town where my Rosh Hashiva was a Rav back in Europe, and that's all it is. And it shouldn't be like some of these other Hasidic groups, and for that reason he's, you know, much more independent, and so you could say, and so he's the Woodridger Rav, you know, and that's more or less, you know, the way that you look at it. And you know, when the Baba Rav, the Chusi Yigan used to come daven in our shul, he used to tell our Rav, Rabbi Fishbein, Rabbi Fishbein Shlita, that, you know, in the Haim, you would have 3 or 4 Rebbe She'eniklich fighting over a Zelach HaShteitel v Kanianga Lake, and especially as a funny sounding name, Kanianga Vusmer. So, he Kanianga Ruv, although Rabbi Fishbein generally say White Lake Ruv. And again, this idea, it's not necessarily Hasidic thing. Again, this idea is such and such a Rav, that's how they said in Lithuania, really is how they said in Germany and everywhere else. So it's not, and so too Satmar. He was the Rav of Satmar, and it was meaning the Satmar Rav was the Rav of Satmar. The previous Satmar Rebbe was the Rav, mostly in Genta in Yugoslavia, and briefly after the war in Sighet, as his brother was, and his father was, and his brother was killed in the war, and in the Holocaust. His brother was named Zalman Leib. And then his father was Datzei Chaim, who was the brother of the Satmar Rav, and then of course their father was the Rav in Sighet. So Sighet was really where the dynasty was for several years, and the Satmar Rav was only really the Rav in Satmar, and, you know, himself. My ancestors were Rabbanim in the county of Satmar, and Krula. Also, Satmar Rav was the Rav in Krula, and in Eresheva, and in Yerushalayim, it's also the Rav. But again, I want to just try to provide more of a history lesson. There was recently an article in the Jewish Press addressing this, which, you know, the Jewish Press is a religious Zionist newspaper, right? And so to talk about this history isn't taking sides or anything, you know, we're just talking about history and things. So, as you know, you can see I'm an award-winning historian, so so I can talk a little bit about history, and so we're gonna discuss, you know, what exactly is this term Neturei Karta, and again, you can find this in the Jewish Press this week. The term Neturei Karta comes from a medrash from Chazal, that there was some Roman soldiers were guarding Yerushalayim, and they said, and the Talmidei Chachamim said, "Who are you?" And they said, "We're the Neturei Karta. We are the guardians of the city." I once saw one of the Neturei Karta groups in English called themselves the Friends of Jerusalem, but the guardians of the city, meaning the guardians of Jerusalem. it's a very strong connection to Yerushalayim Kodesh for the ones who call themselves the Neturei Karta. So the Gemara there says, no, you're not the Neturei Karta. You're not the guardians of the city. You're the Mechablim. You're the destroying the city. And we, the Talmidei Chachomim, we, the Torah scholars, the pious Torah scholars, are the guardians of the city because we're offering spiritual protection to the city. And so that's where the term comes from. It's an ancient term. So then the question is, where does this term come up in the modern parlance? So to a certain extent, there are a few figures that you can look at in Yerushalayim. That's where the movement and the term really became strong. So in the pre-state Jerusalem, right, in the early 20th century, the chief rabbi of Jerusalem was Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. And it was a big tzaddik, very holy person, and very interesting of how he approached things. He was opposed to the Zionist movement, but he was actually very good friends with Rabbi Kook, who was the leader of the religious Zionists. And at that time, they're basically split into two camps, which had friendship with one another, but different views. They loved each other, although at a certain point they did have a falling out and stopped, having working together. But still, they loved each other, and that was, there was a tremendous love between Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld and Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook. But again, even though their views were radically different, they loved each other. And that's, I think, the way the Klal Yisrael should, if you want to know my view, that's how we should approach things. We can agree to disagree, just like Lubavitch Rebbe was friends with Rav Kapach, and obviously also they had different views about Kabbalah, things like that. These are more or less the discussions. But so historically, that term Neturei Karta would have been used already by Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld and his followers, but that was more of a loose colloquial term, and the more official term would be the Eidah HaChareidis, and that was kind of where that there were going to basically be two competing rabbinical organizations in the Holy Land: the Chief Rabbinate, the Rabbanut, which was started by Rabbi Kook, and Rabbi Kook invited into the Rabbanut the Rishon LeZion, which was something that existed earlier, the Sephardic Chief Rabbinate. And then you had the Eidah HaChareidis, the community of the ultra-Orthodox, of the tremblers before God, the Jewish Quakers, not really, but and so that's how the Hebrew term for ultra-Orthodox that's often used is Haredi. And so you had the Haredi community, the ultra-Orthodox community of Jerusalem, and also the Bedats of the Eidah HaChareidis, the Bet Din Tzedek, the true and righteous rabbinical court of the Eidah HaChareidis. And these two organizations exist to this day. The Rabbanut is a government organization, and the Eidah HaChareidis, I guess you could call technically an NGO, a non-government organization, but also it's somewhat of an anti-government organization. But the Eidah HaChareidis doesn't agree with the extremes of the Neturei Karta, But nonetheless, this is part of what we're dealing with there. These are the two major groups, and also both of these groups provide kosher food supervision. And so the Rabbanut is a government kosher food supervision, and the Neturei is independent and is also considered to be the most strict. Although there's certain things that other groups might disagree with, that they might be lenient on here and there with certain aspects, but for the most part, it's like the top, gold seal of kosher. If you want the most strict kosher, especially in the Holy Land, but even outside the Holy Land, things that are important from the Holy Land, is with the stamp of the Neturei. And the thing is, many mainstream foods in the Holy Land have the stamp of the Neturei, including Pepsi. Not Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola has the stamp of the Rabbi of Bnei Brak, who passed away. I'm trying to remember his name now. He was actually the Lubavitcher Chassid. I believe his son is continuing that. Rav Landau, I think, was the name. And so, for that reason, in Jerusalem, people are going to drink Pepsi, and in Bnei Brak, people will drink Coca-Cola because of the politics there of who is certifying the kosher, and both of them, because the government has to have their hands on everything in Israel, also have the Rabbanut, the government's chief rabbi. Also, incidentally, it's kind of like how in America you'll have things that have, the Hisachtis Rabbanim, the CRC with big letters CRC, which is the Satmar Hashgacha, or some other Satmar Gestimmt Hashgacha, whether it's the near Barterov and so forth. And then additionally, you'll also have the OU, and so those are, in a way, the OU is kind of like the Rabbanut of America, although it's not, run by the government, and the Hisachdus would be like the Neturei of America. But again, both of these groups have different views, even different standards and kashrus, different things. But also they depend on each other and they work together. But then again, you might also have something that has the okay hashgacha and the nitra hashgacha, whatever it is. So, in any event, that is a bit of what we're discussing here. These are the realities that people work together and so forth. I think there was another example of a story just about working together. So someone came to Rav Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik, who was the leader of the religious Zionists, the modern Orthodox in America, rabbinical leader, a great rabbinical leader, and he and they asked him, we should boycott Satmar because of their views on Zionism. And then the Rabbi Soloveitchik said, God forbid, chas v'sholom. He said, ever since the Satmar Rebbe came to America, everyone in America got frumer, meaning all the Orthodox Jews, even the modern Orthodox. He said, including myself. He said, having someone, a tzaddik like that in America, was a good influence on America to be more pious in religion. Forget about the political aspects, which are not really political. It's also religious issues, but nonetheless, that's the issue. So then, back to the history of the Neturei Karta. So, as far as activism, I think part of the history that has to be told is the story of a Professor Dahan. Professor Dahan was who we would call today a Baal Tshuva, right? Someone who grew up secular and became ultra-Orthodox. Incidentally, I think we should also mention Nathan Birnbaum, who was the actual founder of Zionism. It wasn't Theodor Herzl, it was Nathan Birnbaum. Why doesn't Nathan Birnbaum get the credit for founding Zionism? Because he also, like Professor Dahan later, became a Baal Tshuva, repented, returned to Judaism, and actually became a very staunch anti-Zionist. So, people don't know that part of the history. And not only an anti-Zionist, but an activist for Torah in Yerushalayim, a very interesting one at that, very colorful character. And they say, he had a grandson or a son who became a conservative rabbi, but still had tremendous respect for his father's teachings. Which again, in those days also there wasn't as much of a distinction between Reform and Conservative and Orthodox either, just like there really wasn't that much of a distinction between the Haredes and the Rabbanut. The Jewish world as it has grown, the Orthodox Jewish world certainly as it has grown in recent years has also become somewhat more polarized. And I don't mind polarization as long as there is love. Meaning we can agree to disagree, but we can still love each other. And that's really the most important point. And that's the point of someone like, we'll say, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who was considered a tremendous gadol, who was respected across the lines because he remained apolitical. And so he was respected in the religious Zionist camp, in the Aguda camp, and in the Haredes camp. So it was around the time of Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, Aguda, which is another ultra-Orthodox organization that started in Germany, and also became very popular in Poland, but was not so popular in Hungary, was united at that time with the Eida Haredes. The two groups had unity, and so at the first Siyum Hashas in Yerushalayim, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld spoke. You wouldn't see that today with the Eida Haredes today, or Satmar. They specifically don't participate in the Daf HaYomi. But getting away from myself somewhat. But let's try to, because I want to finish this up. So it's already half hour. Rambling. Not even really a lecture. So at a certain point, there was a split between the Eida Haredes and the Aguda, and that's where kind of you get to the point where there's a distinction between the non-Zionists, which would be Aguda, and the anti-Zionists. And certainly once the state began, that's where that was the most palpable, because the members of the Aguda participate in elections and have political parties in Israel, but they don't have a Zionist goal. Not only like liturgically that they don't say Hallel on Ha'ir and things like that, but the religious Zionists really are hoping that eventually they'll transform Israel into a religious state politically. And so you might have more radical versions of that, the Kahanists, and then you have some religious Zionists who don't believe in that. I'm trying to remember, there was one in particular, but for the most part, that's kind of where this comes out. The as opposed to again the Aguda, they don't have any interest in turning Israel into a religious state. They would like to make a grassroots effort to bring people to religion, somewhat, but for the most part, but that's not even the main goal of theirs. For the most part, the issue is that they want to protect their interests. And so it's not about making Israel religious, it's whatever status quo agreements that existed in Israel, they want to keep them. And then you have the Neturei Karta that don't vote, they don't, and so then the question is, though, can you, and I think that what I've heard is the major difference between, let's say, the Neturei Karta and Satmar and Brisk and all of them together versus the more extreme Neturei Karta is the question of voting in municipal elections in Israel. Meaning that they oppose having the Satmar and all of those. I think that's maybe the biggest difference. The Satmar and the mainstream Neturei Karta and Brisk and them, they will vote in municipal elections in Jerusalem or in Bnei Brak or Beit Shemesh, wherever they live, because every city is allowed to have municipal government. It's just that they oppose the existence of a Jewish state, and so the anti-Zionists won't participate in the national elections. The more extreme Neturei Karta also won't vote in the Jerusalem elections, and that's the big difference. The other big difference is, which is why I wanted to say, and now the term Neturei Karta was certainly used by Rav Amram Blau. And Rav Amram Blau was a figure who, he had relatives who were with the Aguda, but he was with the Neturei Karta and the Neturei Karta, but he was considered, I would say, the mainstream Neturei Karta, not the extremist Neturei Karta. Meaning he would make protests and get arrested and so forth, but he wasn't marching together with the terrorists. And the Satmar Rav had tremendous love for Rav Amram Blau, but not only the Satmar Rav. Rav Amram Blau welcomed the president of Israel, Zalman Shazar, who was Lubavitcher Chassid, to daven with him on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And he was just one of the guys there, even though he wasn't frum. Not only that, but he loved people, he was makar of people, he did a lot of tzedakah, he was a big tzaddik, Rav Amram Blau. And so that's why we need to make a distinction. We're talking about Rav Amram Blau, we're talking about the Neturei Karta, talking about Rav Amram Blau. He was a tzaddik that everybody respected, and he wasn't involved with. And that's why it should be noted that Reb Zalman Leib didn't use the term Neturei Karta. He just said there's certain people who go and march with the Arabs and with the terrorists, and they're helping the terrorists. Now it should be clear to everybody that nobody from the Neturei Karta want Jews to die. Their belief is that by doing this, they're going to make peace with the Arabs. Not only to say there's good Jews and bad Jews, and only kill those Jews and not us. Chas v'shalom, God forbid. That's not the way that they're approaching it. They're trying to say this is how we can make peace and save all the Jews. The very famous leader of the Neturei Karta in Muncie, and also it should be noted that the Neturei Karta in Jerusalem are mostly Litvish, Talmidei Hagra. They're not Hasidim at all, even though they dress what we would think is Hasidic. That's Yerushalmi dress. But they believe that by working together with the Arabs in this way, they'll make peace and protect the Jews, that they really believe that they're guarding the city of Jerusalem and guarding Eretz Yisrael and trying to make peace and help the Jewish people. That's what they believe. But most other people don't believe that. That's not to say that nobody should be making friends with Muslims or Arabs. It's just that the opposition is against marching together with people who have made it clear that they hate Jews, that they want Jews to die. Now, again, they're hoping, the Neturei Karta are hoping that they'll change minds and that they won't hate Jews anymore by showing that they're, not only that they're good Jews, but even most of the Zionists also don't know any better and they don't deserve to get killed and so forth. They're not, but it seems that recently certain people have made certain statements that cross certain lines. But already since the time of the Satmar, this has been an issue. And so that's another part of this disagreement. Now, I want to mention another aspect is that the Neturei Karta every year on Tisha B'Av protest in Kiryas Joel against the Kiryas Joel Public School District, which of course is Rav Aaron Teitelbaum, the Satmar Rebbe from Kiryas Joel. One of his big accomplishments, even before he was the Rebbe, but also was a matter of dispute that a lot of people disagreed with. The Vizhnitzer Rebbe from Muncie was certainly found it problematic, and that was also in Kiryas Joel. You have the three groups. You have the followers of Rav Aaron, the followers of Zalman Leib, but then also you have the Bnei Ol, and the Bnei Ol, in this sense, also team up with the Neturei Karta, not necessarily with the Arab issue, but with the public school issue, and some other issues as well. Of course, one of the big reasons why a lot of people opposed Rav Aaron being the Satmar Rebbe is because he was the son-in-law of the Vizhnitzer Rebbe, who was a Negudist and voted and everything, and felt it was a very big mitzvah to vote in the Israeli elections. And not only that, but his Rebbitzin apparently speaks a fluent Hebrew, but she also speaks a fluent Yiddish and a fluent English and a fluent German and Hungarian and many other languages. She's a polyglot. But she grew up speaking Hebrew, as did her sisters and so forth. So Hebrew and Yiddish, but they went to schools where they spoke Hebrew, and that's of course something that's very opposed by the Satmar. So again, it's very late now. So I'm already at work. I have to go, but I hope I explained a little bit of the history. I know it wasn't so clear, so we'll try. But thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and we'll see you later. All right, how do I turn this thing off? This one.